Well, welcome back everyone to another video on Shakespeare sonnets. Today we are reading Sonnet 18, which is probably the most famous of all sonnets, definitely the most famous of all of Shakespeare's sonnets. And it's a really representative poem of the Elizabethan sonnet with its pastoral and garden imagery, with its argumentation, and just the lyrical quality of it with its repetitions. There's a lot of commentary on this poem. A lot of good commentary. Most of them, however, do not talk about this sonnet within the larger context of the sonnet sequence. So I'll be doing a little bit of that to supplement. Just to look at this sonnet not as an isolated sonnet as it usually is read, but as one that is tied within this larger sequence of sonnets. So let's read Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So you'll notice at the end of this sonnet that we have the continuation of a theme that was started in Sonnet 15, the one about immortality, about poetry granting immortality, and that's picked up here as well, and we'll talk about that. But the poet begins in this first quatrain, these first 4 lines, by drawing a comparison, and in rhetoric this is called the topic of comparison. It's a way to persuade someone that one thing is better than another. And what's being compared here? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So he's addressing someone, a lover, outside of the poem. Now, is this the fair youth? We don't actually know. Now, I don't see this sonnet as being addressed to the young man, although it comes right after the first 17 sonnets where the narrator does address a young man. I think Sonnet 18 and 19 are free-floating sonnets in a sense where they don't really have a home within the sequence. Some editors, some early editors, actually left out Sonnets 18 and 19 because it didn't fit with the themes. Now, Sonnets 20 and 23 and many of the other sonnets that follow after Sonnets 18 and 19, they do address a young man. I don't see this one as necessarily doing that. I think this could be, it's ambiguous. The gender of the lover here addressed is not specified. Could be, could not. I think it's more likely it's not within this sequence of the young man sonnets or the marriage sonnets. For what it's worth, and there's more about that in the description. Compared to the summer day, the lover addressed here in this poem is better. They are more lovely and more temperate, meaning mild and pleasing. Rough winds shake the darling buds of May. So spring has rough winds, and summer's lease, that summer's allotted time, hath all too short a date. It comes and goes, it does not stay. So a summer's day is beautiful, but it isn't eternal. And sometime too hot the eye of heaven, a symbol for the sun, shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed by clouds. And every fair from fair, every fair thing, he's saying, from fairness or beauty, sometime declines. And there's an interesting thing that's going on here in line 7. In previous sonnets, Shakespeare sometimes adds the declining word or the downward movement right at the end of the 7th line. It happened in Sonnet 15, and the word there was decrease. In Sonnet 13, the final line of line 7 is decease. So there's a pattern here where there's a movement going down about the 7th line, it seems, where he likes to do this. So every beautiful thing from beauty, so every fair from fair, sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy, now here we have the volta, or the turn of the sonnet, but thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. The lover's possession of beauty, of that beauty, will not be lost. Unlike the summer's day, it shall not fade. So there we have this comparison as well. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade. Now here we have a nice allusion to Psalm 23, where the psalmist writes, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. That's the King James Version. Shakespeare would have been familiar with the Geneva Bible, which is very similar. So that imagery of the valley of the shadow of death here is alluded to. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So here's the great comparison between the person he's addressing and the summer's day. This person's eternal summer shall not fade. They'll never lose their beauty, because in eternal lines to time they grow. So lines here, as we saw in 15, this has to do with poetry. Lines of verse, the lineage of verse, but also a lineage like genealogy, a line of kings, for instance. This is a line that won't ever die, that will continue because it's lines of immortal poetry. And again, the couplet reinforces this. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, the significance here of breath and eyes is that these are faculties used for reading or for reciting rhyme or for singing songs or poetry. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So this here refers to the sonnet itself. It's kind of meta in that sense. And the sonnet is giving life to the subject of the poem. Now notice too the repetition that we saw here with the keywords fair, fair. Helen Vendler talks about this. Fair again. This, I guess, would be an instance of polyptoton, the use of the same word or the root of the same word twice in two different senses. It's linked here with fair as well. Then we have eternal summer and eternal lines. So, and of course we've got the inner repetition, the inner rhymes in the repetition of the vowel sounds throughout. Makes it a beautiful poem. And according to the medieval and early modern understanding of poetry, poetry primarily gave fame to the subject of poetry, not so much the author of the poems. It wasn't until the 18th century that we start getting poets who are really preoccupied with their own fame. In Chaucer's House of Fame, poets and their subjects inhabit that house. And in a way, the sonnet sequence is a house of fame for the poet's lover, who is here immortalized in the lines. So it's a beautiful sonnet, very famous sonnet. Definitely share some of the themes within the larger sequence, and I hope that helps with your understanding and enjoyment of it. Thanks everyone for watching, and until next time.